Do you take your son out of school if he didn't score more than 95%? Hi friends, I'm David, a former product manager in the pharmaceutical industry. The purpose of me making this video is actually to shed some light about the vaccine, specifically the COVID vaccine. I do have friends asking me about the safety and efficacy of this vaccine, and I do see a lot of uncertainty in the internet, especially among the public, questioning about the vaccine. Some even spread wrong information about the vaccine and create unnecessary fear-mongering. In the public, you often hear comments like, hey, this vaccine I take already equal to no take. Take for what? Hey, how come I take already can still get infected one? No? Then what's the point? Maybe they developed this vaccine too fast lah. Or you can hear number 3, something like, how about the side effect? Right? Hey, take this vaccine already or sudden death one. If I don't take, my chance of dying is equal to 0 lah. Now, before I further proceed, I would like to give a disclaimer. This is not a medical healthcare professional advice, so please consult your doctor about the vaccine. This is purely my personal opinion based on the data that I've read as of middle of April. And this data are actually from clinical papers. So without further ado, let's straight jump into it. To address concern number 1 about the efficacy of the vaccine, for this purpose, we actually use the Pfizer's vaccine clinical data as a reference. So before I begin, it's actually important to source for the right source of information. Alright, specifically here, when it comes to doing your research, you should refer to what we call a clinical paper or clinical journal. Now, what is a clinical paper or journal? Basically, a journal is a publication firm that validates and cross-check this data before releasing it to the public. Right? They often do due diligence on the data, and these are the source of information that doctors refer to.
This is the clinical paper for the Pfizer COVID vaccine that you can see here. They are actually intending to measure the safety and efficacy of this vaccine. It's actually published by the New England Journal of Medicine, which is a very credible journal. Now, where can you access all this kind of information? You can just simply go to Google Scholar and type in Pfizer COVID vaccine. The top one, you can actually find this paper already. The same goes for every time when you want to do research, you should look for clinical paper, and the journal must be a credible journal. Without going into too much detail, this is the summary of the paper. It's a lot of details, but we will just run through the key components. Basically, it's a 43,000 patient study, of which half were randomized to the Pfizer vaccine and half were randomized to the placebo. Let me quickly pull you through to the design of the clinical paper. 44,000 patients were initially enrolled. Of course, some bailed out, only 43,000 left. They were randomized. All right, this is an observer blind study, meaning to say the researcher do not know which patient are they giving the vaccine, which patient are they giving the placebo. So 50% takes placebo, 50% takes the vaccine, and then they will follow through for 2 months, and then subsequently in each arm around 18,000 of them completed the dose. And now I want to bring you to the most important part, which is the vaccine efficacy against COVID-19 at least 7 days after the second dose, meaning to say after the second dose, which is 21 days after the first dose. Right, so you can see that in the COVID-19 vaccine arm, meaning to say the Pfizer vaccine arm, only 8 patients were infected as opposed to 162 in the placebo arm. Of course, this doesn't mean that they purposely expose the participant to COVID virus. It just means that they can go out and then they will follow up throughout the entire period of the study to see how many of them get infected, and they were monitored on a very consistent and frequent basis. So you can see that on this basis, it actually has 95% efficacy, because if you take 8 plus 6, 162, right, you can derive that this is only 5%, this is 95%. So you are 95% effective at preventing infection. So this is the side effect, the adverse event, what they call the adverse event. All right, green means mild, blue means moderate, severe is yellow, and so forth. Grade 4 is very severe. Okay, so for those age group, they actually break down the adverse event rate by age group. Okay, after the first dose, most of them were mild to moderate. The same pattern is being observed in after number second dose. Okay, and the same pattern you also observe in those patients who are more than 55 years old. Okay, and you can see that most of the adverse event were pain at injection site, redness, swelling. Okay, I want to bring you to this. Okay, these are the most common side effects that you can see after vaccination: fever, fatigue, headache, so on and so forth. And you can see that most of them are either mild or moderate. So in conclusion, from the clinical trial, it is 95% effective and it is mostly very safe. You can see that the adverse events were mostly mild to moderate and they were not very severe side effect from the Pfizer vaccine.
I know some of you may ask, how come people vaccinated already can still get infected one? Maybe is it because they developed the vaccine too fast, right? Or is it because they anyhow just whack just want to get sales only? No, this is not true. So for this, I would like to share with you a clip from Dr. Leong Hoe Nam. He's an infectious disease specialist in Singapore, and let's hear what he has to say.
So if I've been vaccinated and I've been exposed to the virus will try to overcome the immune system and infect. If the immune system is on the weaker side, they'll infect, and depending on the amount of immunity there is, it will have varying severities. If I have a robust immune system with high amount of antibody levels, this will in turn block not only the first infection, but the second and third infections. Hence, you have heard of companies talking about having the third dose. When you have the first dose, you have this amount of antibodies. When the second dose, you have this amount of antibodies. When you have the third dose, you have high whopping amount of antibodies. These antibodies will be like a GPMG, general purpose machine gun, that will tear down all viruses, even if it's mutated.
What you're saying is the vaccination will not prevent us from getting infected?
The vaccine, unfortunately, is not 100%. Other vaccines, chickenpox, measles, there are some failure rates. Vaccinations changes from a severe illness to a moderate illness, from a moderate illness to a mild illness, and a mild illness to no illness at all. In fact, if you look at those people who became infected despite vaccination, majority of them do not have any symptoms. Currently, we have at least 5 different brands of COVID-19 vaccines. They vary in efficacy. Some very good at 94-95%, some at 50-60%. In fact, if you look at the mutants, different vaccines would respond differently. Certainly, these are all made by different companies, and there would in turn be different responses. Different individuals would respond differently to these vaccines as well. Most definitely in terms of allergies. Some people will be more allergic to this than the other, and some tolerability of the vaccines may differ.
So, if it doesn't prevent us from getting the virus, why should we still get vaccinated?
Is 95% vaccine efficacy, is that enough? I'll be very delighted if my son scores 95 marks and above consistently. But if he fails to get more than 95, do I take him out of school? Do I take him out of education? No. Because even with 93% or 92%, my child is benefiting from education. And indeed, even 92-93% with mutants, the country, yourself, is benefiting from the vaccination. We benefit from a severe illness, become a moderate illness, from moderate illness, become a mild illness, now illness and none. The other way of looking at it is, my son, instead of getting a bad failure, is going to end up with a good pass. Perhaps not excellent, but a good pass is nonetheless great.
So, summarizing what Dr. Leong has said, basically there are 2 points. Number 1, the strength of your immunity will dictate whether or not you get the infection. The higher levels of your antibodies, the less chance of you getting infected. And we have the assurance that this is 95% of the time. 95% of the time you have this protection. Number 2, you still stand a chance to benefit even if you get infected because of the reduction in severity of the illness. This is the case even for the mutant strain. So with the protection from the vaccine, here are 5 benefits I see from the vaccine. Number one, protecting yourself. Number two, protecting your family, especially if they are elderly. Number three, protecting the high-risk patients. These are like your cancer patients whose diagnosis and treatment got delayed due to this pandemic. From what was initially a treatable and curable condition now becomes a death sentence to them. Number four, your economy. Only with herd immunity being achieved, then the economy can resume to where it was. And of course, lastly, number five, travel. So put things into perspective. Out of 33 million population in Malaysia, if assuming a 95% efficacy, 31.35 would have this protection, they would not get infected, and the remaining 1.65 who may get infected, may or may not get infected, they still benefit because their severity is severely, significantly reduced, right? So now you may ask, okay, this is so good, but what about the blood clot? Now, on the vaccine blood clot, recently there have been some news on AstraZeneca's vaccine and the incidence of blood clot. Blood clot is actually a common occurrence when your immune system is involved. For example, when you are fighting off an infection, the immune system needs to be triggered to fight off the infection. But sometimes due to various factors, the immune system behaves differently. As with the case of COVID patients, because the body is infected, the immune system is triggered, and therefore the blood clot occurrence is high, about 0.18%, meaning to say 1.8 in every 1,000 patients. Right? But of course, you can. What I want to stress out is that the blood clot that is observed in AstraZeneca vaccine is a slightly different type of blood clot. Specifically, it's called the thrombotic thrombocytopenia. What this means is that you have blood clot, at the same time you also have very low platelet count due to some factors related to PF4, but we shall not go into further detail on that. As of today, there is no direct evidence that points to the AZ vaccine causing this, but it's merely an observation as of today. So now again, I would like to bring you to the clinical paper. What do they have to say about the incidence of this blood clot in the AstraZeneca vaccine?
This is a clinical paper, again from the New England Journal of Medicine, that studies the COVID vaccine induced immune thrombotic cytopenia. Okay, so from this paper, right, they found that because every time there's adverse events like this, they needed to be reported to the healthcare authority, and specifically in the case of Euro, it's actually reported to the European Medical Agency. Okay, at least 169 possible cases of cerebral venous sinus thrombosis, and also 53 possible cases of splenic vein thrombosis were detected among 34 million recipients of the AstraZeneca vaccine. So if you add 169 plus 53, that is 222. 222 possible cases out of 34 million recipients. This translates to about 0.0006% chance, and also which is around 6 in 1 million. And how about the Pfizer vaccine? 35 possible cases of central nervous system thrombosis among 54 million recipients of the Pfizer mRNA vaccine. So 35 out of 54 million. What are the odds in this case here? It's about 0.00009%, meaning to say around 0.98 in 1 million. In fact, if you ask me, your chance of being struck by lightning is 1 in 1 million, and this is 0.98. It's even rarer than being struck by a lightning. In the same paper, there are also other estimation of the rate of VITT, which is vaccine-induced thrombotic thrombocytopenia. In this estimation, it's estimated to be about 1 case per 100,000 exposure. Now, from where they estimate this, from how they derive this figure, I'm not sure yet, but I just want to share with you for transparency purpose. However, if you compare this rate caused by the vaccine, which is 1 per 100,000, you compare it against the general population, the rate is around 0.22 to 1.7 cases, 1.57 cases per 100,000. So if you take a median, it's around 0.89, give it 0.9. So I would say that the vaccine-induced one is very close to the general population. Now, why is this important? Because whenever you compare something to see whether is it caused by it or not, you always need to compare it against the general population. Of course, no conclusion can be made as to this point, but I just want to share with you it is close to the background rate. To give you another example, this is also from another clinical paper. So basically, the European Medication Agency stated that the information available so far showed that the number of thromboembolic events in vaccinated people was no higher than that seen in the general population. So remember what I shared earlier, why I need to share the baseline rate? This is to illustrate this point.
So now that we have established that it is a 6 in a 1 million occurrence, 6 in a 1 million chance, what does all this mean? How do we put that into perspective?
This is a good illustration that I managed to find of an intensivist who has a YouTube channel called MedCram. You can go and check it out. So basically, he's illustrating the rate of cerebral venous sinus thrombosis with CVST across different group of population. Now, where did he find his source? He found it from the clinical paper. Now, we have to bear in mind that this CVST does happen. It's not something new, right? And definitely in the general population, there are bound to be people who have that. And you can see that in the general population, there are 0.5 per 100,000 that actually have this incidence. And if you look at those people who contracted COVID, their chances of getting this CVST is about 4.5 to 20 in 100,000. And if you compare it against the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is 0.09 per 100,000, so you can see that the CVST that occurred along with the taking of this vaccine is much lesser than the general population, meaning to say it's lesser than the background rate. And even if you compare it against AstraZeneca vaccine, which so far we have established is around 6 in 1 million, that is about 0.6 per 100,000. That is still close to the general population and definitely much less than people contacting COVID-19. So essentially, getting COVID-19, you have much more chance of getting this CVST compared to the very minuscule chance of you getting it from the vaccine. And in fact, they also illustrated other examples like from pregnancy, from oral contraceptive, you also get this and they are at higher probability of happening than from taking the vaccine. To further illustrate my point, I would like to show you an article by BBC, which they actually compare the chance of AstraZeneca vaccine causing you harm versus other type of events. If you look at this table, looking at the 55 years old arm, the chance of the AZ vaccine giving you side effect, a severe side effect, is 4 in 1 million. Comparing it to dying from coronavirus, which is 800 in 1 million. So meaning to say this event is 200 times more likely to happen than this. Essentially, what this article is trying to say is that the chance of other events that can cause you harm, such as dying from coronavirus, such as dying from accident or road accident, it's much more likely to happen than the vaccine giving you harm. And in fact, the chance of you getting severe side effect from the vaccine is close to your chance of being hit by a lightning, which is 1 in 1 million. And yet, people fear this 4 in 1 million, but they do not fear all this. I just want to share that everything in life is not certain. There is no 0% risk in life. The same applies to the medication you take. Here, I would like to bring you to the product insert of a very common hypertension medication that we take, which is losartan. It's a very common blood pressure medication. You can see here that what are some of the warning and precaution. Renal function deterioration, meaning to say it may cause harm to your kidney. And of course, along with it comes other types of adverse events, although these are moderately severe. And I would like to point you to this what we call a post-marketing experience, meaning to say once in a while there's a rare incidence of such thing being happen, and they actually recorded it and report it. So you can see that even for blood pressure medication, very rarely, sometimes hepatitis may occur, thrombocytopenia may occur. Does this sound familiar?
I would like to give you another example. Do you know your diabetes medication metformin? Do you know that by taking it, you actually have a 3 to 9 in 100,000 chance of getting the lactate acidosis, which is a life-threatening condition on its own. But does it mean that doctors stop giving you? No, obviously not, because they know that the probability of causing you harm by not giving you this medication, it's much higher than the minuscule chance of this medication giving you this very minuscule chance of this lactate acidosis. The same goes for your cholesterol medication, the statins. I'm sure many of your parents take it. Do you know that in statins you have 1 to 2 in 100,000 chance of getting this rhabdomyolysis? So the list goes on. There's no 0% risk in life. The same goes for your medication. Every year, there are 1.8 million car accidents or death. Yet we are okay to drive and okay to work. Why? Because we perceive that the benefit far outweigh the risk, right? We perceive that we can, the chance of us getting salary definitely is there, right? And the risk of us getting into car accident is very low. Now that I've explained it to you, I've put this analogy to you, it's your call, right? 4 to 6 in 1 million chance, your call whether you want to take it or not. Then I also hear people who argue, if I take the vaccine, I'm entering into the statistics. But let me ask you, what about your risk of getting infected by COVID? It's 1% and it could get worse with the current situation. Oh, then people argue, oh, I can be more careful when I go out. But how do you know when you enter a lift, the air ventilation actually circulates the virus into you? Or how about when other people did not wear masks properly, they take out a mask? Or maybe how about you when you're eating, when your mask is taken down? A lot of things are beyond your control. And unless you live under the rock, unless you have your own farm, grow your own food, totally don't go out, then definitely you're part of the statistics. The statistic is there to reflect real-world occurrence, and you are part of it. No one is above the statistics. I repeat, no one is above the statistics. Conclusion, it's all about the benefit versus the risk. Nothing is 100% effective, and so nothing is 0% risk in this life. Linking back to the school analogy, do you take your son out of school if he didn't score more than 95%? No, right? Because you know that he stands to benefit from the education, despite knowing that he has a chance of being struck by lightning when he goes to the school. It's a no-brainer to send 33 million students to school, despite knowing that 5% of them may not get an A. And also, maybe 32% of them may get struck by lightning when going to school. For people who fear the vaccine, the purpose of this video is not to force onto you, but rather to share with you the right information and to gain the right perspective. What I disagree with is people who do not have the right understanding but yet chose to spread the wrong information, right, and also manipulate people's emotion into joining them. It's irresponsible because it does not take effort to spread the wrong ideas because you do not need to do due diligence. It does not take effort. But instead, it is always harder to do the right thing because it takes effort. At the end of the day, given this understanding, if you are still afraid of the blood clot, it is perfectly fine. But don't be a donkey like this person who is afraid of a 6 in 1 million chance side effect from the vaccine, but totally not afraid of a 1 in 100 chance, meaning to say your 1% chance of getting COVID, which is 1,600 times more likely to happen. By going around, gathering, not wearing masks at all times. It's like you're afraid of being struck by lightning, but not afraid of drinking and driving. If you like this video, appreciate your thumbs up. It will help spread the right perspective and knowledge to the people around you. And if you have any content that you would like to see, please feel free to comment down below. Until then, please stay safe.